When you planted many years ago, you really put a major investment of your land and your time and your future, I suppose, into forestry. And it's very important that when you come to thinning and managing and indeed final harvesting of your plantation, that your expectations are achieved. However, it is very important to match your expectations with what is actually growing out there in your forest. There are a range of scenarios, but there is the best scenario where every year, because you have a very good forest, your trees are putting on value. By managing them, you're further increasing that value, and that's going to contribute to a very significant return at the end of the day. And that might be the pension pot that you set out to achieve many years ago. On the other hand, through maybe no fault of your own, but maybe by taking your eye off the ball over a number of years, you may not achieve those expectations, and you may end up with a crop that is not going to return the value that you expected. So, do you know what you have, or are you simply hoping for the best? That really starts from the very moment that you plant your forest, because it's very important that as a forest owner, you appreciate what has been planted, what type of species they are, and what are their particular management requirements over the next few decades. It's your forest, you need to be prepared, and I suppose that is the message that really is very, very important, and hopefully that will be reinforced by some of the other presentations here today. So thinning is key, but what is also critical in relation to thinning is the timing of thinning. Now, you've probably heard and seen these slides before, why thinning is important, but it really is no harm at all to go back over the reasons why thinning is important. It provides increased growing space, which results in a healthier forest, growing bigger trees. It takes out the less valuable material, and it also provides periodic income over those thinnings. It increases revenue returns versus no thin, and we have the research to prove that. And I suppose the aim of all forest owners should be to try to maximize the most valuable timber category, which is the sawlog. We saw the difference in sawlog there as you go from a pulp to pallet to sawlog. It's clear to see it's a very, very solid piece of lumber, and it is sawlog, and that is what the mills will pay top dollar for, particularly at the moment. But we have to acknowledge that sometimes thinning is not going to be practical for a range of reasons. It may be because, as Aidan mentioned, that your site may be too exposed. There may be too much of a risk of wind blow. On the other hand, you could be in a situation where the land that you planted is quite poor, low fertility. As a result, you have quite a low productive crop. And in other cases, and increasingly with the highly productive plantations that many of you are growing, if you leave your trees too long and leave them grow too tall without thinning, you may miss that opportunity to thin completely. And then you're into a no-thin situation, and there's really nothing you can do about that. Having said that, having a no-thin crop, it's not the end of the world, but it does have consequences for the value and your returns from your forest. Now, if trees were able to talk, they'd probably be telling us when we should be thinning, okay? But unfortunately they don't, and we cannot see the inside of the trees. But the trees reach a stage in their growth that they need to be thinned. And just this slide here hopefully will illustrate the message that's coming from the tree. And this is a cross-section of a cut stump, probably a Sitka spruce. And as you can see there, we all know how to count the age of a tree. We count the number of rings. But what's also very informative is the distance between each of those rings. And the wider the gap, the faster those trees are growing. So you can see in this particular, I reckon this is probably about, it's certainly well into its 20s, this particular tree. But if you look there at the first maybe 14 or 15 rings or years of growth, you can see that there's very, very fast growth there. And really what thinning should aim to do is to maintain that rate of growth. But you can see there, if you look maybe even at the end of the biro or the pencil there, that as the years passed and as it went beyond about 15 or 16 years in this particular case, the rings have become much more narrow. And that's reflecting the fact that the trees are slowing down. And why are they slowing down? They're slowing down because they're competing more and more with their neighbours. It's like having a room full of people that's chock-a-block. It's going to become very uncomfortable and there's going to be casualties. And that's essentially what's happening here. So the tree really is telling us that if we intervened earlier, we would continue to get that rate of growth and be able to bring forward our commercial timber development. Instead of waiting 5 or 6 years longer to get pallet wood, we can grow our trees to pallet at a much earlier stage. And again, our own Teagasc research is proving this. We have the research to show that thinning is more profitable than no thinning in most crops. That thinning early is desirable to reduce how long you will have to wait until you reach your sawlog and your clearfell. Rotation lengths of up to 0.7 of a cubic metre, that's approximately 0.7 of a tonne per tree, is possible after as early as 24 years. And indeed, some of the mills, like Murray's, will take sawlog at a much smaller average tree size, down to maybe 0.5 of a cubic metre. So if you were able to go into your site, particularly if it's at risk of wind throw, and thin early but thin carefully, you will be able to accelerate the growth of your commercial timber in the forest. Now, what happens if you delay thinning for one reason or another? Well, it's counterproductive. It reduces the diameter growth. That diameter growth will be very, very slow to recover. And it also increases the windrow risk because you're going in thinning when trees are up maybe 15, 16 metres tall, which in our climate is high risk strategy. And finally, unthinned stands, as we probably can hear, they have longer rotation lengths. It just takes the trees much longer to put on the girth because they're still competing with their neighbours. And of course, it brings an increased windrow risk. So I mentioned our Teagasc research there. This is one of the reports that was done by Dr. Niall Farley there last year. It's a technology update produced by Teagasc, and we have some copies available on our Teagasc stand if you'd like to see what findings. And also one of the outcomes, and you've probably seen this before, is our Thinning Ready Reckoner. And this is a fantastic tool for forest owners, even with not a lot of forestry knowledge. If you know what the average stocking of trees in your forest is, and if you know what the average diameter, using this simple ready reckoner, it will tell you whether or not your plantation is ready for thinning, is it too soon to thin, or if you are probably gone beyond safely thinning your plantation. So what do you need as a forest owner thinking about as you approach first thinning, or indeed subsequent thinning, or indeed clearfell? Well, access is important, particularly for first thinning, obviously. And there was mentioned there earlier about inspection paths. These are a simple, cheap way of creating almost a permanent access in through your forest. It enables you as a forest owner to maybe walk through it. I know a number of forest owners who go for a walk with their dog, or they go for a walk with their family through their forest, and they really never realised how enjoyable that was until they cut the paths. And of course, critically, it's important for people like foresters to go in there to be able to get a really good idea of how the trees are looking from the inside, not from the outside, because they can be two completely different stories. In addition to access, that enables us then to measure, do some early measurement, girth tapes. You know, the girth of a tree will tell us a lot in terms of what stage development it's at, and possibly what type of timber categories will come out of your thinnings. Felling licence is obviously required before you cut any trees, and indeed it will be required to certainly be in train when you're applying for a roading grant, okay? Because again, provision of suitable access for timbers to be able to come to your forest, to be able to load and to leave safely and join the public road, that is going to be an essential part as well. And indeed, roading can be a problem for forestry plantation. You need professional advice on how best to deal with your roading issues. But all of these things take time. So when you're planning for thinning, and particularly for first thinning, you need to give yourself plenty of time. And I'd be saying that you need to be giving yourselves at least 2 years to prepare for thinning, because putting in inspection paths, maybe getting an idea of how the crop is developing, applying for a road grant and building your forest road or your Bellmouth entrance, and indeed getting your felling license, they all take time. And then there's the question about, well, how long will it take me to get a machine into that forest to actually start thinning my forest? So thinning or harvesting is not an overnight, an instantaneous operation. It takes time, and as forest owners, I think it's really important that you realise that you give yourself that maybe a 2-year lead-in time. So as we thin and as the years go by, the forest moves up through the value chain. You start off at first thinning, and as was mentioned earlier, the aim of first thinning is to remove as much of the inferior timber, the lighter timber, and a lot of what's coming out is pulpwood, up to 70% in a first thinning. But as you go through your second thinning and your third thinning, you'll see what the impact of thinning is. You can see that the pulp, the least valuable commodity that you want to sell, is reducing, and the most valuable commodity is developing more and more. And that is the pallet wood, and then the saw log comes into the picture. And eventually, at about maybe 30, 35 years of age, for a yield class 24 Sitka spruce, you reach your clear fell, where you can see the thinning is doing a great job. It is maximising your saw log, which is now up to 53%, your pallet is 33%, and your pulp is down to 14%. Compare that to what Mark Hogan was saying earlier, where he dealt with the clear fell, and there was over 40% pulp in that particular crop. So saw log, that is where the money is. So again, typically a first thinning will yield around €500 per hectare. Move on through the thinnings, and this is the impact. Up to €25,000 per hectare, and at the moment a lot more than that. And that essentially is what thinning does, and that is what, as forest owners, maybe if there's a take-home message at all here today, that is the benefit of thinning. So then, again, moving towards clear fell, being market ready. Again, do you aim for a high quality, high value crop, or are you happy to accept a lower value, maybe disappointing crop, given you your expectations when you set out on that road all those years ago? So there's two aspects here: the decision to clear fell, and there is the logistics of being ready. So what are we talking about in the decision? First of all, it's very important you need to know what you have growing in your forest, be it a fully thinned site ready for clear fell, or be it an unthinned site. It's critical that if there's a lot of commercial timber, you know what's in there and what the approximate value is, because forewarned is forearmed. Then the market conditions. Keep an eye on how timber prices are going. Keep in touch with people like yourselves. Come to these events. Somebody said to me there earlier that they keep an eye on the quilcher prices, and that's excellent, okay? So keep your hand in the ring as regards how well the market is going. Advice and timing. Get advice from a forester, from ourselves, as to maybe when is the best time. Do you need urgently to consider clear felling this? Is wind blow becoming a high risk, or is it advisable to wait on another couple of years before you finally harvest? And then your sales strategy. How are you going to go about selling this? Are you going to leave it in the hands of a forestry consultant? Are you going to sell it direct, timber buyer, a sawmill, or a harvesting contractor? Are you going to take on some of the responsibility yourselves? We heard about the different options: the standing sale, the roadside sale, the delivered in. And I know there's a number of forest owners here who definitely have experience of roadside sales, and I'm sure that they would argue that for them has proven a very successful way to sell. But again, think about it. What's very important as well is adopt a professional approach when you're selling high value timber. Have maps, have an inventory if possible, and have a sort of a checklist to ask those whom you might be getting to tender for your crop. The logistics. Make sure that you have a valid felling license. Look at the forest road. Did it collapse or is it heavily damaged after your last thinning? Make sure that it's properly maintained and fit for purpose. Harvesting contract. There's different templates of harvesting contracts out there, but issues like what is the price? Are you being paid per category or across the board price? How is there a deposit going to be paid to you before harvesting begins? How long will you be waiting for payment? And a crucial element as well that can be built into a harvesting contract is the health and safety requirements. Now, you as forest owners may not appreciate, but you do have important responsibilities under health and safety regulations. And again, those are outlined in an information leaflet that is available on our stand. Your forester, your harvesting company, they will also have very important health and safety responsibilities. So some of those can be acknowledged in the harvesting contract as well. And then the supervision. Is the harvesting operation going to be supervised? And a very important topic is the dispatch of your timber from your site. How is that going to be monitored? Is there going to be a protocol in place? My advice to a lot of forest owners is that the best thing they could do is to put a gate or a barrier on their forest, and that they should control access into that forest. A little bit afterwards then, there is the replanting requirement. And when you would have completed your felling license application for your clear fell, the replanting plan would have been included in that. So in some cases, I know that the owners will look after the replanting themselves, and in some cases, the buyer may also include the replanting as part of the overall package. It's very important to decide which way you're going to go. Replanting is another day's work, but again, there is information out on our stand as regards replanting. So, just to conclude, we started out with this question: do you know what you have, or are you simply hoping for the best? Well, coming here today to Talking Timber and looking and talking to the industry and maybe hearing the advice and taking away the information, and think about it and mull over your own situation, and hopefully you will reap the rewards, because at the end of the day it's your forest and you need to be prepared. Thanks very much.